One of his fellow countrywomen has spent her life doing exactly that kind of thing, teaching youngsters in her own country for about 15 years, I think, and then being sent by her superior to work among the poor in what is identified as one of the poorest places on earth. And she has chosen to stay there. How she survives, only God knows, but I'm so glad that she is here. Sister Trish Franklin.
Thank you very much, Philip, for that introduction. I have a wonderful boy upstairs who's running my PowerPoint for me. So, Jason, I think I would like it running all the time, okay, so people don't have to look at my face up there. Unless the Lord builds the house. As I've spent weeks preparing my thoughts around these beautiful and significant words, I have pondered once again God's goodness for me and for his people. So I thank you for the opportunity for these reflections. Nothing I have to share with you today and tomorrow is too cerebral. Every word comes utterly from the experiences of my life. And I wish to begin by providing a scenario of 3 different houses. Recently, in fact, pre-Christmas of 2008, I read an article that spoke of the serious renovations being made to the massive physical, tangible house of prayer called Westminster Cathedral. Despite the refurbishments, the Westminster Choir School was still able to prepare for carol services, even though this perfectly crafted from beginning to end cathedral was, in short, a building site. And the article described its renovations. Encased in scaffolding, false temporary ceilings, floor coverings of squeaky brown boards, yellow and black tape stuck on the floor to warn visitors of unexpected stops, behind schedule revamping. Thousands of geometrically choreographed steel poles holding the scaffolding and crossbars, steel mesh hanging everywhere, pulleys in operation, disruptive noise, and a congestion of plugs and wires. Comparative to this situation is what I'm naming house number 2. We read of a retreat centre in Derbyshire, England, which is an example of a physical, tangible house, offers enriching advantages towards solitude with God. To be noted is that it is not only a building, but an experience, a spiritual adventure of discovery and challenge, of wonder and awe, a house which provides a spirit of contemplative prayer, simplicity and littleness, a journey into the depths of one heart and the heart of God, a passage towards wholeness and transformation in Christ, a contemplative voyage nurtured in solitude and with the hope that this is made fruitful in active ministry. It is a place where hearts are exposed to the personal, passionate, unconditional and lavish love of God. And now to the third house story. Imagine that a contractor comes to you and tells you that he wants to build for you a house with unimaginable splendour and glory. Not only will this builder build this house for you, he has promised to pay all the cost. This house has come at no easy cost, for the builder sacrificed his own son so that you might have every blessing. Although the builder will build the house, he has asked for your help, for you to come alongside him and to do his will. He will strengthen you to do his will and give you all that you need. All this builder requires of you is agreement. Although agreeing sounds like an easy task, you will resist it at times. You will want to do good to satisfy the builder, but the good you want to do, you won't. and the discord you desire to resist, you will give in to at times. Some of the complaints about the builder are his time schedule and how it is natural to wait on him even though he is good and his plan is perfect. Another popular complaint about him is that he is all glorious and humbles those that are lifted up, whereas in our natural state we love control and to be able to call the shots. We want it now, all of it, whatever it might be, results attained, plans fulfilled, goals achieved, dreams come true, skills acquired. It's like waiting and wanting an immediate answer to that letter, fax and email. Most of the time we want our prayers answered pronto too. Despite our failure to wait on him or submit humbly to his will, he is still faithful to build the house. Not on any merit of our own, but because of what his Son has accomplished on our behalf. Here God knows our weakness and insufficiency. He is a patient and loving God whose mercy endures forever. Even though his children never deserve it, he always delights in blessing us. I relay these three house story situations to you as a way of sharing the woven pattern of my life's journey so far, with its elements of the three houses, which I've just pointed out. This will eventuate towards sharing the house I have worked in Vietnam, particularly over the past 15 years, and maybe that story must wait till tomorrow. A little about myself. I am the youngest in a family of 5 children, with wonderful parents. Actually, my father was a convert. At the age of 14, the contractor put an offer to me of the glorious house he offered to build for me, and which he very much wanted me to build with him. At age 19, I committed myself to his offer, and only in retrospect, and surely each day is an ongoing learning and sacred retrospect, I have come to know his plan, his time schedule, his payment of costs, my assisting with the building, the scaffolding, the repairs, disruptive noisy machines, steel mesh, plugs and wires. And yet, there have also been the solitary moments like house number 2, journeys into my heart and the heart of God, therein finding abundant, prolific, bountiful and profound blessings. In preparing my words to offer you at this convention, I have been made more aware about God's house for me in my life and how he, as the most superb architect, has changed its appearance many times. After my final vows in 1979, I found myself in a very convenient house, made by God, no doubt, with primary school children from very wealthy families. I don't think I worked in vain too much. I was then, not now, a very, very enthusiastic young religious. So many stunning revelations came through the Word, the Eucharist, and my ministry in those early years within that house, and I call to mind many relevant words from Scripture. Don't grow weary in doing good. Apart from me, you can do nothing. From Proverbs, commit to God all that you do and your plans will be established. And St. Paul writes, therefore, my beloved, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. However, as I worked, played, prayed, and lived in that house of the Lord at that time, my head, ears, eyes, and particularly my heart, pounded daily with the words, go to the poor, go to the poor. For years, these words milled within me. I offered to go to our mission in Peru, but maybe that was me calling the shots. My offer wasn't taken up. What house did God really want to build for me? And how did he truly want me to work? were questions that disturbed me still. Between 1985 and 1989, I believe my steps were guided by God as an avenue for me to find peace and assurance from those pounding words, "Go to the poor." God is always right on time. He's a big, big God. In those years, 85 to 89, I worked in refugee camps in Thailand amidst hundreds and thousands of Cambodian, Vietnamese and Laotian people in exile. They always had something within them that fueled their spirit and provided them with the courage they needed to face each day. These people had such a passion for the possible. It was as though they had a sense of the point voyage, where, while it was still dark, the birds sing out their welcome before the first rays of dawn renew the earth. A waiting person is a patient person. Patient living means to live actively in the present and to wait there. Waiting is not passive, it involves nurturing the moment. Refugees, of course, are experts at waiting. Their way of life taught me that when we relinquish the future into the hands of God, then the fog clears, the nature of the dis-ease and the blockage within us reveals itself. And what did they show me? To live simply. Bamboo sticks and blue plastic tent cities. To love generously. They shared their rations, carrying home twice a week carcasses of the chicken, which they used to call chicken dye. They showed me how to care deeply, families sharing their tents and clothes, and together escaping wired fences to obtain wood for fuel. They showed me how to speak kindly. They were always saying to each other, "We will move to a better place, let's be hopeful." And when a family had been accepted to go to the USA, Australia, France, New Zealand, wherever, they'd say, "I'm so happy for you and your family that you've been accepted to go to wherever," even though that person saying that had a future of still confounded by paperwork, health checks, and months and years of more waiting. These years in Thailand saw the Lord change his house for me from one that was very comfortable, wealthy and convenient to one that was a mere thatched hut of discomfort, fatigue, inconvenience and awkwardness. This big change reminded me of a story that became very relevant to me at that time. And the story goes, a fire had broken out in the middle of the night in a 2-story house in London. All the occupants had rushed into the street to escape, except for the youngest, a 4-year-old. Surrounded by dense smoke, he appeared at the upstairs window. "Jump, my son, jump," shouted his father. "But Daddy, I can't see you," cried the little guy. "Jump, son, don't be afraid, I can see you." The question I could have asked in those days in refugee camps, because yea, I was with the poor, was, is the Lord's house, his building, ever complete? Unless the Lord builds the house, they labour in vain who build it. I know and believe and have experienced and will experience more, no doubt, that we so need to consult God in every aspect of his scheduling, and that making plans, counting the cost, all require research and wisdom. Scripture says, "In all ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths." I learnt at grassroots level in my days in refugee camps that it is not possible to run ahead of the Lord looking for ways to fix things, but rather, and in such a desperate situation, I was able to abide in the source of wisdom, and that was and is to consult with God within the heart. I want to diverge a little from my own story for a moment and share some thoughts about what is so beautifully and utterly beautiful, and that is the heart. How many words are evoked when we ponder that word heart? Listening, hearing, contemplating, speaking, knowing, loving, and seeing. And it is by seeing with the heart that we can clarify the words, unless the Lord builds the house, and how ready we need to be to allow our hearts to be changed. It was St. Paul who stated that faith comes from hearing, but I believe even more that we are shaped very much by what we see. We think from what we see. Pictures elicit our feelings in ways that words sometimes do not. For example, we picture Christ as Good Shepherd, Sacred Heart, suffering servant, teacher, preacher, healer, and as tomorrow's Gospel goes, companion on the journey as at Emmaus. In our ordinary life, images last and they stick. They're not easily dislodged. In a consumerist culture such as ours, images are used to appeal to our appetites. Drink me, buy me, smoke me, wear me, and most of all, look at me and be like me. However, the image of the good life is not how Christians pledge to make good on the one and only life they have to live. The good life is seen and heard in the image of God, and therein reigns truth and holiness, justice, peace, love, and they hold sway forever. I am reminded when dwelling on the visual, on the seeing of image reflections. The central panel, bigger and more attractive, and two slimmer, smaller panels. They are related to the central panel, always leading the eye back to the centre, even as each panel can stand alone, offering its own meaning and message. Sifting through what is deserving of our seeing, being discriminating in what we will give our eyes to, discerning what is worthy of our looking, means that we must train and discipline the eye. Whatever may be said of seeing with the eye of the heart, it is first a matter of actually paying attention, focusing the eye, looking at and into something without distraction. Our gift and task is to learn how to see anew each day, learning how to look. Christian life centres our eyes and hearts to the central panel and leads us to a way of seeing by loving. The more we see, the more we love. The more we love, the more we see. Refining, purifying our eyes allows us to see each day and everyone and everything far more deeply, and to read the world and everything in it with love. Our truest total presence to all that is around us is a language of love. The second half of John's Gospel is an intimate poem of love. For God, this intimacy is the point of everything else. Without the tender laying of his head on the breast of Jesus, for John, God's whole plot is lost. Our eyes fall and are kissed by texts and images as they take hold of the mind and heart of us who are contemplatives. Our eyes learn to read and see the presence of God in all of human life, in the events of the here and now, in the life of the church, and in the wide, wonderful, and often whacked out world. This is like praying all the time. Praying by looking, by seeing as a whole way of life. What is needed are caressing, beckoning, gentle voices that teach us how to see, hear, and to speak the language of love. This, I believe, is what happened within me in Thailand in the 80s. Every day challenged me to learn how to focus on what was good and to set aside the rest. That builder in my 3 house stories cradled me in that dwelling of a refugee camp, according to his costing, his architecture, his disruptive noises, and his contemplative voyage, leading to ministry, and also totally with his interior design, the movement of seeing with my heart. Actually, this movement was also made very popular for us by the smiling Jesus watercolours of the 70s and 80s, which were invitations to see Jesus as everyone's best pal. And so when instructed to see Christ in the other, maybe we read Christ into the other, rather than allowing the other to manifest something of the mystery of Christ by being who they were. I experienced in the 80s that I could allow myself to be buoyed up by a wide sea of humanity, hundreds and thousands of refugees, and yet have some sense of who Christ might be, but not merely by seeing him in the other, but by receiving in the glance of those incredible people some trace of a face whose contours I had to squint to discern, for that light is blinding. The spirituality of seeing does match and is not complete without the Eucharist prayer and silent contemplation. And here that priceless gift is offered, that of being still. In the deeper movements of prayer there are no words. There is only the embrace of silence. And that takes us and carries us toward unspeakable mystery. Wrapped in the word, beneath and beyond all words, we see not all at once, but slowly, shielding our eyes to gain some small glimpse. We want to see, but the light is blinding. We search and we strain to see the face, to look upon the face of God. This response, the prayer of standing still, simply looking, beholding, and breathing in the love of God, is being offered. Prayer of the deepest kind, contemplative prayer, is above all about seeing. As John Milton wrote, they also serve who only stand and wait. Receive the gaze of the other. I'm going to get you to have an experience of this in a moment. Let him look at you. The face of God did turn to me, sought me and searched me out. He did make a claim on my life, wanting me, all of me, every inch and every ounce of me. God's eyes seeing with a long and loving gaze, and then the eyes saying it all. Let me live, please let me live, in you, through you, with you, person to person. And still the one I have called to learn, have learned to call Father or Mother, the loving parent who gives all life, who sustains and protects it, who counts the hair on the head of the child and does not forget the sparrow, is the one who eternally looks on us and gazes upon us with delight. There is a story told of a mother and her little daughter in Trinidad. They are the poor of the earth, and the mother takes great care each evening to launder the one well-worn dress that her daughter wears to school day after day. Each morning, as the little girl leaves the front door to set off for class, her mother asks her to stop, turn around toward her for a moment, and she says, "Just stand there. I love to look at you." Contemplation is a way of looking and a way of seeing. The one caught up in contemplation knows that it is not only I who look and gaze and behold, it is the other, whose name above all naming is love, who gazes upon me. A beloved child hears the words of the mother, "Just stand there. I love to look at you." It is ours to allow ourselves to be gazed upon by God, to be looked on with love by love itself. It is this that we learn in the deeper movement of prayer and even in our sleeping, so that awake or asleep we are poised to be gifted in the presence of the one who gives to his beloved in sleep, as Psalm 127 says. We can see so clearly the movement at the heart of reality, and we can hear the beating of many human hearts. I invite you now to stop and to experience the gaze of God, Let him look at you with love. Aren't we lucky? Thanks, Jason. The image of the heart cannot be trivialized. In the Old Testament it was leb, lebab, and the New Testament cardia, which convey not simply feelings of tenderness and intimacy, but rather they refer to the deepest dimensions of the self, so deep that it can be said that the person does not simply have a heart, but is the heart. And so in those years in Thailand, a quiet held me, no cradled me for a long time, and I was changed. And I have learnt that to be really alive, we must be willing to put down one phase of life after another, one house after another, refusing to spend life treading water in any one phase. Life is for the living. For those who intend to keep on living, whatever the cost, because to do anything else is to betray creation. If you want to put excitement into our lives, if we want to, we must be willing to put it there ourselves. We must be willing to change directions, to change houses, when the path we're on has become more like a cul-de-sac that leads only back to where we once began, where we were housed initially, rather than a pattern of life that moves forward. Sometimes changes are meant not so much to change one's life, but to stir one's soul. It is easy to die before we've even begun to live. I believe that we are not meant to get stuck in life. We're meant to go on from layer to layer of our souls until we get to the core of the spiritual life and find faith in all of it. We are meant to sing our way from one thing to another in life so that we can come to know the blessings of the life of God in every single solitary dimension. How foolish we would be not to move to the invitation to go on to another house because we'd miss out on so much. We are called to be builders in the house, God's house, with a passion. And yet again, the movement of seeing with the heart leads us often to ask, how shall I know the truth of God's way for me when I actually see it? Truth is that which does the good of God and does it so kindly that none of the people of God are hurt by it. Truth is the Jesus who said, in the face of rules, rise and walk, and in the face of destructive license, go and sin no more. And in the face of irresponsible affluence, go and sell what you have and give it to the poor. And in the face of human needs, the Sabbath was made for us, not we for the Sabbath. There are no rules of any institution anywhere that supersede the truth that is the love of God. Truth is not any one truth, not any one institution, nor any one way, nor can we truly bend ourselves to all of them. There is nothing more stunning than to realize that the quality of the God space, His house, around us depends on what we ourselves bring to it. It shocks us into understanding, as Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in this world. As we are, so the world shall be. If the question is, where is God? The answer is distressingly uncomplicated. God is wherever we know God to be, wherever we bring God to be, no more and no less at any time, anywhere or in anyone. Maybe in Thailand, I thought I'd arrived at a house where I thought I'd live forever. Not to be. Let's journey on and build again within another of the Lord's houses, His mission in mind, unique to me, unfinished without me. There was another house to live in, and a more ultimate surrender of control over my life, a more intense gathering of all my resources for a riskier leap of faith than I had ever made before. And tomorrow I will take you to Vietnam. Thank you. Recently, in fact, pre-Christmas of 2008, I read an article that spoke of the serious renovations being made to the massive physical, tangible house of prayer called Westminster Cathedral. Despite the refurbishments, the Westminster Choir School was still able to prepare for carol services, even though this perfectly crafted from beginning to end cathedral was, in short, a building site. And the article described its renovations. Encased in scaffolding, false temporary ceilings, floor coverings of squeaky brown boards, yellow and black tape stuck on the floor to warn visitors of unexpected.
One of his fellow countrywomen has spent her life doing exactly that kind of thing, teaching youngsters in her own country for about 15 years, I think, and then being sent by her superior to work among the poor in what is identified as one of the poorest places on earth. And she has chosen to stay there. How she survives, only God knows, but I'm so glad that she is here. Sister Trish Franklin.
Thank you very much, Philip, for that introduction. I have a wonderful boy upstairs who's at stops behind schedule revamping. Thousands of geometrically choreographed steel poles holding the scaffolding and crossbars, steel mesh hanging everywhere, pulleys in operation, disruptive noise, and a congestion of plugs and wires. Comparative to this situation is what I'm naming house number 2. We read of a retreat centre in Derbyshire, England, which is an example of a physical, tangible house, offers enriching advantages towards solitude with God. To be noted is that it is not only a building, but an experience, a spiritual adventure of discovery and challenge, of wonder and running my PowerPoint for me. So Jason, I think I would like it running all the time, okay, so people don't have to look at my face up there. Unless the Lord builds the house. As I've spent weeks preparing my thoughts around these beautiful and significant words, I have pondered once again God's goodness for me and for his people. So I thank you for the opportunity for these reflections. Nothing I have to share with you today and tomorrow is too cerebral. Every word comes utterly from the experiences of my life. And I wish to begin by providing a scenario of 3 different houses. Door, a house which provides a spirit of contemplative prayer, simplicity and littleness. A journey into the depths of one heart and the heart of God. A passage towards wholeness and transformation in Christ. A contemplative voyage, nurtured in solitude, and with the hope that this is made fruitful in active ministry. It is a place where hearts are exposed to the personal, passionate, unconditional, and lavish love of God. And now to the 3rd house story. Imagine that a contractor comes to you and tells you that he wants to build for you a house with unimaginable splendour and glory. Not only will this